The Pope is the Bishop of Rome and the head of the worldwide Catholic Church. He is also known as the Supreme Pontiff, Roman Pontiff, or Sovereign Pontiff. From the 8th century until 1870, the Pope was the sovereign or head of state of the Papal States, and since 1929 of the much smaller Vatican City-State. From a Catholic viewpoint, the primacy of the Bishop of Rome is largely derived from his role as the apostolic successor to Saint Peter, to whom primacy was conferred by Jesus, who gave Peter the keys of heaven and the powers of binding and loosing, naming him as the rock upon which the church would be built. The most recent pope was Francis, who died on April 21, 2025. Although his office is called the papacy, the jurisdiction of the episcopal see is called the Holy See. The word see comes from the Latin for seat or chair, said referring in particular to the one on which the newly elected pope sits during the enthronement ceremony. It is the Holy See that is the sovereign entity under international law, headquartered in the distinctively independent Vatican City, a city-state which forms a geographical enclave within the conurbation of Rome, established by the Lateran Treaty in 1929 between Fascist Italy and the Holy See to ensure its temporal and spiritual independence. The Holy See is recognized by its adherents at various levels to international organizations and by means of its diplomatic relations and political accords with many independent states. According to Catholic tradition, the Apostolic See of Rome was founded by Saint Peter and Saint Paul in the 1st century. The papacy is one of the most enduring institutions in the world and has had a prominent part in human history. In ancient times, the popes helped spread Christianity and intervened to find resolutions in various doctrinal disputes. In the Middle Ages, they played a role of secular importance in Western Europe, often acting as arbitrators between Christian monarchs. In addition to the expansion of Christian faith and doctrine, modern popes are involved in ecumenism and interfaith dialogue, charitable work, and the defense of human rights. Over time, the papacy accrued broad secular and political influence, eventually rivaling those of territorial rulers. In recent centuries, the temporal authority of the papacy has declined and the office is now largely focused on religious matters. By contrast, papal claims of spiritual authority have been increasingly firmly expressed over time, culminating in 1870 with the proclamation of the dogma of papal infallibility for rare occasions when the Pope speaks ex cathedra, literally from the chair, of Saint Peter, to issue a formal definition of faith or morals. The Pope is considered one of the world's most powerful people due to the extensive diplomatic, cultural, and spiritual influence of his position on both 1.3 billion Catholics and those outside the Catholic faith, and because he heads the world's largest non-government provider of education and health care, with a vast network of charities. The word pope derives from ancient Greek pi alpha, papas, father. In the early centuries of Christianity, this title was applied, especially in the East, to all bishops and other senior clergy, and later became reserved in the West to the Bishop of Rome during the reign of Pope Leo I, 440–461, a reservation made official only in the 11th century. The earliest record of the use of the title of Pope was in regard to the by then deceased Patriarch of Alexandria, Heraclius, 232–248. The earliest recorded use of the title Pope in English dates to the mid-10th century, when it was used in reference to the 7th century Roman Pope Vitalian in an Old English translation of Bede's Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum. Position within the Church. The Catholic Church teaches that the pastoral office, the office of shepherding the Church, that was held by the Apostles, as a group or college with Saint Peter as their head, is now held by their successors, the bishops, with the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, as their head. Thus is derived another title by which the Pope is known, that of Supreme Pontiff. The Catholic Church teaches that Jesus personally appointed Peter as the visible head of the Church, and the Catholic Church's dogmatic constitution Lumen Gentium makes a clear distinction between apostles and bishops, presenting the latter as the successors of the former, with the Pope as successor of Peter, in that he is head of the bishops as Peter was head of the apostles. Some historians argue against the notion that Peter was the first bishop of Rome, noting that the episcopal see in Rome can be traced back no earlier than the 3rd century. The writings of Irenaeus, a church father who wrote around 180 AD, reflect a belief that Peter founded and organized the church at Rome. Moreover, Irenaeus was not the first to write of Peter's presence in the early Roman Church. The Church of Rome wrote in a letter to the Corinthians, which is traditionally attributed to Clement of Rome c. 96, about the persecution of Christians in Rome as the struggles in our time, and presented to the Corinthians its heroes. First, the greatest and most just columns, the good apostles Peter and Paul. Ignatius of Antioch wrote shortly after Clement, in his letter from the city of Smyrna to the Romans, he said he would not command them as Peter and Paul did. Given this and other evidence, such as Emperor Constantine's erection of the old St. Peter's Basilica on the location of St. Peter's tomb, as held and given to him by Rome's Christian community, many scholars agree that Peter was martyred in Rome under Nero, although some scholars argue that he may have been martyred in Palestine. Although open to historical debate, 1st century Christian communities may have had a group of presbyter bishops functioning as guides of their local churches. Gradually, episcopal sees were established in metropolitan areas. Antioch may have developed such a structure before Rome. In Rome, there were over time at various junctures rival claimants to be the rightful bishop, though again Irenaeus stressed the validity of one line of bishops from the time of St. Peter up to his contemporary Pope Victor I and listed them. Some writers claim that the emergence of a single bishop in Rome probably did not occur until the middle of the 2nd century. In their view, Linus, Cletus, and Clement were possibly prominent presbyter bishops, but not necessarily monarchical bishops. Documents of the 1st century and early 2nd century indicate that the Bishop of Rome had some kind of preeminence and prominence in the Church as a whole, as even a letter from the Bishop, or Patriarch, of Antioch acknowledged the Bishop of Rome as a first among equals, though the detail of what this meant is unclear. The Catholic Church teaches that, within the Christian community, the bishops as a body have succeeded to the body of the apostles, apostolic succession, and the Bishop of Rome has succeeded to St. Peter. Scriptural texts proposed in support of Peter's special position in relation to the Church include Matthew 16. I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Luke 22. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. John 21. Feed my sheep. The symbolic keys in the papal coats of arms are a reference to the phrase the keys of the kingdom of heaven in the first of these texts. Some Protestant writers have maintained that the rock that Jesus speaks of in this text is Jesus himself or the faith expressed by Peter. This idea is undermined by the biblical usage of Cephas, which is the masculine form of rock in Aramaic, to describe Peter. The Encyclopaedia Britannica comments that the consensus of the great majority of scholars today is that the most obvious and traditional understanding should be construed, namely, that rock refers to the person of Peter. According to the Catholic Church, the Pope is also the new Eliakim, a figure in the Old Testament of the Bible who directed the affairs of the royal court, managed the palace staff, and handled state affairs. Isaiah also describes him as having the key to the house of David, which symbolizes his authority and power. Both Matthew 16:18, 19 and Isaiah 22:22 show similarities between Eliakim and Peter getting keys which symbolize power. Eliakim gets the power to close and open, while Peter gets the power to bind and loose. According to the book of Isaiah, Eliakim receives the keys and power to close and open. I will place the key of the house of David on his shoulder, what he opens, no one will shut, what he shuts, no one will open. Isaiah 22:22. According to the book of Matthew, Peter also gets keys and power to bind and loose. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew 16:19. In the books of Isaiah 22:3 and Matthew 16:18, both Eliakim and Peter are compared to an object. Eliakim to a peg, a structure that is driven into a wall or other structure to provide support and stability, while Peter to a rock. And I will fasten him like a peg in a secure place, and he will become a throne of honor to his father's house. Isaiah 22:23. In Matthew 16:18 Peter was compared to a rock. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Matthew 16:18. Election, death, and resignation. Election. The Pope was originally chosen by those senior clergymen resident in and near Rome. In 1059, the electorate was restricted to the cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, and the individual votes of all cardinal electors were made equal in 1179. The electors are now limited to those who have not reached 80 on the day before the death or resignation of a pope. The pope does not need to be a cardinal elector or indeed a cardinal, since the pope is the bishop of Rome. Only those who can be ordained a bishop can be elected, which means that any male baptized Catholic is eligible. The last to be elected when not yet a bishop was Gregory XVI in 1831, the last to be elected when not even a priest was Leo X in 1513, and the last to be elected when not a cardinal was Urban VI in 1378. If someone who is not a bishop is elected, he must be given episcopal ordination before the election is announced to the people. The Second Council of Lyon was convened on May 7, 1274, to regulate the election of the Pope. This council decreed that the cardinal electors must meet within 10 days of the Pope's death, and that they must remain in seclusion until a Pope has been elected. This was prompted by the 3-year sed vacanti following the death of Clement IV in 1268. By the mid-16th century, the electoral process had evolved into its present form, allowing for variation in the time between the death of the Pope and the meeting of the cardinal electors. Traditionally, the vote was conducted by acclamation, by selection, by committee, or by plenary vote. Acclamation was the simplest procedure, consisting entirely of a voice vote. Since 1878, the election of the Pope has taken place in the Sistine Chapel, in a sequestered meeting called a conclave, so called because the cardinal electors are theoretically locked in, conclave, i.e., with key, until they elect a new pope. 3 cardinals are chosen by lot to collect the votes of absent cardinal electors. By reason of illness, 3 are chosen by lot to count the votes, and 3 are chosen by lot to review the count of the votes. The ballots are distributed and each cardinal elector writes the name of his choice on it and pledges aloud that he is voting for one whom under God I think ought to be elected before folding and depositing his vote on a plate atop a large chalice placed on the altar. For the papal conclave, 2005, a special urn was used for this purpose instead of a chalice and plate. The plate is then used to drop the ballot into the chalice, making it difficult for electors to insert multiple ballots. Before being read, the ballots are counted while still folded. If the number of ballots does not match the number of electors, the ballots are burned unopened and a new vote is held. Otherwise, each ballot is read aloud by the presiding cardinal, who pierces the ballot with a needle and thread, stringing all the ballots together and tying the ends of the thread to ensure accuracy and honesty. Balloting continues until someone is elected by a 2/3 majority. With the promulgation of Universi Dominici Gregis in 1996, a simple majority after a deadlock of 12 days was allowed, but this was revoked by Pope Benedict XVI by motu proprio in 2007. One of the most prominent aspects of the papal election process is the means by which the results of a ballot are announced to the world. Once the ballots are counted and bound together, they are burned in a special stove erected in the Sistine Chapel, with the smoke escaping through a small chimney visible from St. Peter's Square. The ballots from an unsuccessful vote are burned along with a chemical compound to create black smoke, or fumata nera. Traditionally, wet straw was used to produce the black smoke, but this was not completely reliable. The chemical compound is more reliable than the straw. When a vote is successful, the ballots are burned alone, sending white smoke, fumata bianca, through the chimney and announcing to the world the election of a new pope. Starting with the papal conclave, 2005 church bells are also rung as a signal that a new pope has been chosen. The dean of the College of Cardinals then asks two solemn questions of the man who has been elected. First he asks, "Do you freely accept your election as Supreme Pontiff?" If he replies with the word accepto, his reign begins at that instant. In practice, any cardinal who intends not to accept will explicitly state this before he receives a sufficient number of votes to become pope. The dean asks next, "By what name shall you be called?" The new pope announces the regnal name he has chosen. If the dean himself is elected pope, the vice-dean performs this task. The new pope is led to the room of tears, a dressing room where 3 sets of white papal vestments, imitatio, await in 3 sizes. Donning the appropriate vestments and remerging into the Sistine Chapel, the new pope is given the fisherman's ring by the Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church. The pope assumes a place of honor as the rest of the cardinals wait in turn to offer their first obedience, adoratio, and to receive his blessing. The cardinal protodeacon announces from a balcony over St. Peter's Square the following proclamation: Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus papam. I announce to you a great joy. We have a pope. He announces the new pope's Christian name along with his newly chosen regnal name. Until 1978, the pope's election was followed in a few days by the papal coronation, which started with a procession with great pomp and circumstance from the Sistine Chapel to St. Peter's Basilica, with the newly elected pope borne in the Sedia Gestatoria. After a solemn papal mass, the new pope was crowned with the triregnum, papal tiara, and he gave for the first time as pope the famous blessing Urbi et Orbi, to the city Rome and to the world. Another renowned part of the coronation was the lighting of a bundle of flax at the top of a gilded pole, which would flare brightly for a moment and then promptly extinguish, as he said, "Sic transit gloria mundi, thus passes worldly glory." A similar warning against papal hubris made on this occasion was the traditional exclamation, "Annos Petri non videbis," reminding the newly crowned pope that he would not live to see his rule lasting as long as that of St. Peter. According to tradition, he headed the Church for 35 years and has thus far been the longest reigning pope in the history of the Catholic Church. The Latin term, sed vacanti, while the see is vacant, refers to a papal interregnum, the period between the death or resignation of a pope and the election of his successor. From this term is derived the term sedevacantism, which designates a category of dissident Catholics who maintain that there is no canonically and legitimately elected pope, and that there is therefore a sed vacanti. For centuries, starting from 1378 onwards, those elected to the papacy were predominantly Italians. Prior to the election of the Polish-born John Paul II in 1978, the last non-Italian was Adrian VI of the Netherlands, elected in 1522. John Paul II was followed by election of the German-born Benedict XVI, who was in turn followed by Argentine-born Francis, the first non-European after 1272 years and the first Latin American, albeit of Italian ancestry. The current regulations regarding a papal interregnum, that is, a sed vacanti, vacant seat, were promulgated by Pope John Paul II in his 1996 document Universi Dominici Gregis. During the sed vacanti period, the College of Cardinals is collectively responsible for the government of the Church and of the Vatican itself, under the direction of the Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church. Canon law specifically forbids the cardinals from introducing any innovation in the government of the Church during the vacancy of the Holy See. Any decision that requires the assent of the Pope has to wait until the new Pope has been elected and accepts office. In recent centuries, when a Pope was judged to have died, it was reportedly traditional for the Cardinal Camerlengo to confirm the death ceremonially by gently tapping the Pope's head thrice with a silver hammer, calling his birth name each time. This was not done on the deaths of Popes John Paul I and John Paul II. The Cardinal Camerlengo retrieves the ring of the fisherman and cuts it in two in the presence of the cardinals. The Pope's seals are defaced, to keep them from ever being used again, and his personal apartment is sealed. The body lies in state for several days before being interred in the crypt of a leading church or cathedral. All popes who have died in the 20th and 21st centuries have been interred in St. Peter's Basilica. A 9-day period of mourning, novendialis, follows the interment. Resignation. It is highly unusual for a pope to resign. The 1983 Code of Canon Law states, if it happens that the Roman pontiff resigns his office, it is required for validity that the resignation is made freely and properly manifested, but not that it is accepted by anyone. Benedict XVI, who vacated the Holy See on February 28, 2013, was the most recent to do so, and the first since Gregory XII's resignation in 1415. The Pope's official seat is in the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran, considered the cathedral of the Diocese of Rome, and his official residence is the Apostolic Palace. He also possesses a summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, situated on the site of the ancient city of Alba Longa. The names Holy See and Apostolic See are ecclesiastical terminology for the ordinary jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome, including the Roman Curia, the Pope's various honors, powers, and privileges within the Catholic Church and the international community derive from his episcopate of Rome in lineal succession from the Saint Peter, one of the 12 apostles. Consequently, Rome has traditionally occupied a central position in the Catholic Church, although this is not necessarily so. The Pope derives his pontificate from being the Bishop of Rome but is not required to live there, according to the Latin formula ubi papa, ibi curia, wherever the Pope resides is the central government of the Church. As such, between 1309 and 1378, the popes lived in Avignon, France, a period often called the Babylonian captivity in allusion to the biblical narrative of Jews of the ancient kingdom of Judah living as captives in Babylonia. Although the Pope is the diocesan bishop of Rome, he delegates most of the day-to-day work of leading the diocese to the cardinal vicar, who assures direct episcopal oversight of the diocese's pastoral needs, not in his own name but in that of the Pope. The most recent cardinal vicar was Angelo de Donatis, who served from 2017 until 2024. The current cardinal vicar is Baldassare Reina. This does not mean that popes ignore their diocesan responsibilities. For example, when Pope John XXIII announced his intention to establish the Second Vatican Council in 1959, his reflections dealt first with the state of the Catholic Church within Rome before broadening his gaze to the entire world. Though the progressive Christianization of the Roman Empire in the 4th century did not confer upon bishops civil authority within the state, the gradual withdrawal of imperial authority during the 5th century left the Pope the senior imperial civilian official in Rome, as bishops were increasingly directing civil affairs in other cities of the Western Empire. This status as a secular and civil ruler was vividly displayed by Pope Leo I's confrontation with Attila in 452. The first expansion of papal rule outside of Rome came in 728 with the donation of Sutri, which in turn was substantially increased in 754, when the Frankish ruler Pippin the Younger gave to the Pope the land from his conquest of the Lombards. The Pope may have utilized the forged donation of Constantine to gain this land, which formed the core of the Papal States. This document, accepted as genuine until the 15th century, states that Constantine the Great placed the entire Western Empire of Rome under papal rule. In 800, Pope Leo III crowned the Frankish ruler Charlemagne as Roman Emperor, a major step toward establishing what later became known as the Holy Roman Empire. From that date onward the popes claimed the prerogative to crown the emperor, though the right fell into disuse after the coronation of Charles V in 1530. Pius VII was present at the coronation of Napoleon I in 1804 but did not actually perform the crowning. As mentioned above, the Pope's sovereignty over the Papal States ended in 1870 with their annexation by Italy. Popes like Alexander VI, an ambitious if spectacularly corrupt politician, and Julius II, a formidable general and statesman, were not afraid to use power to achieve their own ends, which included increasing the power of the papacy. This political and temporal authority was demonstrated through the papal role in the Holy Roman Empire, especially prominent during periods of contention with the emperors, such as during the pontificates of Pope Gregory VII and Pope Alexander III. Papal bulls, interdict, and excommunication, or the threat thereof, have been used many times to exercise papal power. The bull Laudabiliter in 1155 authorized King Henry II of England to invade Ireland. In 1207, Innocent III placed England under interdict until King John made his kingdom a fiefdom to the Pope, complete with yearly tribute, saying, "We offer and freely yield, to our Lord Pope Innocent III and his Catholic successors, the whole kingdom of England and the whole kingdom of Ireland with all their rights and appurtenances for the remission of our sins." The bull Intercedere in 1493 led to the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which divided the world into areas of Spanish and Portuguese rule. The bull Regnans in Excelsis in 1570 excommunicated Queen Elizabeth I of England and declared that all her subjects were released from allegiance to her. The bull Inter Gravissimas in 1582 established the Gregorian calendar. In recent decades, although the papacy has become less directly involved in politics, popes have nevertheless retained significant political influence. They have also served as mediators, with the support of the Catholic establishment. John Paul II, a native of Poland, was regarded as influential in the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. He also mediated the Beagle conflict between Argentina and Chile, two predominantly Catholic countries. In the 21st century, Francis played a role in brokering the 2015 improvement in relations between the United States and Cuba. International position. Under international law, a serving head of state has sovereign immunity from the jurisdiction of the courts of other countries, though not from that of international tribunals. This immunity is sometimes loosely referred to as diplomatic immunity, which is, strictly speaking, the immunity enjoyed by the diplomatic representatives of a head of state. International law treats the Holy See, essentially the central government of the Catholic Church, as the juridical equal of a state. It is distinct from the state of Vatican City, existing for many centuries before the foundation of the latter. It is common for publications and news media to use the Vatican, Vatican City, and even Rome as metonyms for the Holy See. Most countries of the world maintain the same form of diplomatic relations with the Holy See that they entertain with other states. Even countries without those diplomatic relations participate in international organizations of which the Holy See is a full member. It is as head of the state equivalent worldwide religious jurisdiction of the Holy See, not of the territory of Vatican City, that the U.S. Justice Department ruled that the Pope enjoys head of state immunity. This head of state immunity, recognized by the United States, must be distinguished from that envisaged under the United States Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act of 1976, which, while recognizing the basic immunity of foreign governments from being sued in American courts, lays down 9 exceptions, including commercial activity and actions in the United States by agents or employees of the foreign governments. It was in relation to the latter that, in November 2008, the United States Court of Appeals in Cincinnati decided that a case over sexual abuse by Catholic priests could proceed, provided the plaintiffs could prove that the bishops accused of negligent supervision were acting as employees or agents of the Holy See and were following official Holy See policy. In April 2010, there was press coverage in Britain concerning a proposed plan by atheist campaigners and a prominent barrister, Geoffrey Robertson, to have Pope Benedict XVI arrested and prosecuted in the UK for alleged offences, dating from several decades before, in failing to take appropriate action regarding Catholic sex abuse cases and concerning their disputing his immunity from prosecution in that country. This was generally dismissed as unrealistic and spurious. Another barrister said that it was a matter of embarrassment that a senior British lawyer would want to allow himself to be associated with such a silly idea. Sovereign immunity does not apply to disputes relating to commercial transactions, and governmental units of the Holy See can face trial in foreign commercial courts. The first such trial to take place in the English courts is likely to occur in 2022 or 2023. The Pope's claim to authority is either disputed or rejected outright by other churches, for various reasons. Thank you for watching this video.